So Vox has this. It's actually from back in I think February. Um, I was just looking for some kind of uh. See, I don't agree with the polling narrative. Surprise, surprise. I never agree with the polling narratives as they come up. Um, I was looking for somebody that was going to take the position that Trump's polling numbers are being driven by a reaction to terrorism rather than this kind of conventional convention bump stuff. I I think that if you go back in time and you look at and you really carefully analyze things, you'll see that these convention bumps are rarely statistically significant. In fact, a lot of the times, what you'll see probably, if you look at it carefully, is that there wasn't a bump at all, right? Now you got to be careful, right? The media will tell you there's a bump, and what the media tells you will get written into history. But let me just say it that it's not always true. One example of that was the supposed bump that occurred in Canada when Stephen Harper went out against the I can't even remember exactly what it was. It was some like anti-immigrant thing that he came out against, right? It was the niqab thing. That's what it was. Um, the media wants to tell you that this was. I don't even. It's not even a year later, and I've forgotten what it even was. Um, it was the anti-niqab thing, right? Everyone said, "Look, Harper got a bump in the polls." In fact, that bump was never statistically significant. Um, a lot of the polling firms didn't measure it at all, right? So it was like a couple of polling firms saw the conservatives up, like 1 point in a survey with a 3.5% margin of error. It was complete bullshit. But that's what the newspapers wrote about, and that's what will end up in the history books. At least for a little while, until somebody comes, you know, somebody in the future goes back and fixes it. And even this, I'm supposed to be opposed to historical revisionism. The people writing the history are incompetent. You have to revise it because the people that are looking, the media is incompetent, the journalist profession is incompetent, the whole thing, and I mean, okay, so it's half incompetent and half skewed, right? You have to remove yourself from the situation. There's no way you can get an unbiased source at the moment. So the best thing you can do is record as many biases as you can and let the future deal with it, right? Shoot them all and let God sort it out. Except, not really. It's a metaphor. What I mean to say is, record everything and let the future figure it out. That's how you have to do it. So, I mean, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to the polling in 2004, 2008, or 2000 or 96 or whatever, right? My personal memory doesn't go back much further than the year 2000. So, um, I am not going to make any specific accusations or claims, right? But I think that I am skeptical that a rigorous analysis would uphold the idea that there was a statistically measurable bump, despite what the graphics that you saw on CNN said, right? So I was looking for something that would, you know, um, it helps when I'm not the only person saying something, right? To find somebody with more letters beside their name, you know? And I might not. I'm not saying I want to, parrot what they're saying or anything. I'm going to do my own analysis, but it's just useful to have somebody on your side, right? And that's what I was looking for. I didn't really find anything, but I did find this, which was this Vox Media takedown from February. Um, and I'll be back in a second. I'm going to change my batteries. Okay, so the Vox takedown article. Um, it is characteristic. Well, it's not an article. It's a film that's attempting to explain Donald Trump using a supposedly obscure political science theory about authority. Um, it's characteristically hokey hogwash from Vox. There's no historical context, but it does get the right idea, and it's what I was looking for, and they're at least right. And if you're going to pay attention to the polls over the next few months, it's what you should be looking at. This is the thing, right? This is what's going to um, uh, destroy Trump or somehow allow him to win, right? Through whatever fluke. Okay, so a couple of criticisms with the video. First, it's not like you can separate the population into authoritarians and non-authoritarians. Like every other measurable trait, everybody has some kind of authoritarian streak, and it can be turned up or down depending on reactions to events. So this idea, like right off the bat, you want to, the authoritarians in the Democratic Party have been moving to the you want to look at our tendency towards authoritarianism using a bell curve, right? Most people are somewhere in the middle. There's some people like me that really hate it and are off on the one side, and then there's some people on the other side that are very, very much open to it. And they point out in the video that you can't just ask people questions about, well, okay, the reason why you can't just ask people direct questions about this is because their perceptions are not that simplistic. They may be authoritarian about child raising and libertarian about marijuana, right? And no, there's no reason to put them together except for your desire to make simple analyses out of complex realities, right? I know you'd like to put people in boxes like that, but you can't. So sure, you can't just ask people directly, right? But what that means is that we're in a spectrum, right? Sorry, that's a little bit of, rain. Um, so let's drop the idea that we can be separated into authoritarians and non-authoritarians, as though there's like an authoritarian. I bet the people that did it probably think that we're genetically determined. That there's a genetic determination as to whether we're authoritarians or not. And if we can find it, then we can get rid of those people. Or breed them. Hogwash. Nonsense. You can't just split people up like this. I'm about the least authoritarian person that you can find, and I'm still like, probably something like 10% authoritarian. Whereas most people are going to be between like 25 and 75%. And a lot of them are going to tell you that they'll vote for Hillary Clinton, but those buttons can be pushed. This is the Manchurian candidate, right? You can get to them. You can set off their authoritarian tendencies, even though they might be classified as non-authoritarians on your on your survey, right? Second, it's not like Trump is some kind of new phenomenon. This is the first time we've seen an authoritarian on the right. What? They're suggesting that there may be more Trumps in the future. Well, how is Trump different than Stephen Harper or George W. Bush or Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon? He's not. It's the same bullshit. It's the right wing. That's what the right wing is. So I mean, it's It didn't come from nowhere. It's been fostered by the right forever. It's what the right is. So I mean, to suggest that he's gonna no, it's when Trump loses the election, things will carry on as though nothing happened. Okay. Other than that, these authoritarian types might learn a few things and try to tweak it for the next time. We've been listening to bullshit about strong leadership for years, and we'll keep hearing bullshit about strong leadership afterwards. Okay. Third, it's not like conservatism is historically divorced from authoritarianism, which is what I just said, kind of. Right? You think George W. Bush was less authoritarian than Donald Trump? In what way? How? Fourth, it's not obscure either. It's called neoconservatism. It's actually the dominant political philosophy in the world today. They are trying to argue that the dominant form of political thought is obscure. Only at Vokes, folks. Only Vokes. Vokes is kind of like, sounds kind of like Fox. Have you ever noticed that? It's like the liberal Fox. It really is. It's just as bad. What they're describing is neo-Hobbesianism. It's the Leviathan. Okay? It's Leo Strauss, it's Michael Ignatieff, it's all over the fucking place. You've got right-wing variants, you have left-wing variants. Like I say, it's the dominant political philosophy of the existing era. It's not obscure. Unless, you get all your news from CNN, you pray with your hand over your heart and your other hand on the Bible 3 times a day. Like you'd have to be. Actually, I didn't say it the way I wanted to say it. You pray with your hand on your heart and your other hand on the American flag 3 times a day. That's what I meant to say. Hey, this is Raw. I'm not going back. It's everywhere. It's dominant. The only people that aren't aware of this are the people that watch Fox News. Fifth, it's not like the Democrats don't do the same damn thing, right? Try to make it seem like it's only the Republicans are authoritarians, right? In fact, Clinton herself is one of the strongest authoritarians we've seen in quite a while. She's one of the strongest authoritarians of our era. And if this election were between Clinton and somebody that's a lot, some low-energy beta like Jeb Bush, she'd be the one pushing the neocon activation jargon. She's actually tried a few times already. And don't be surprised if you hear it again before November. About how she starts talking about how she'll keep us safe. Even though she's losing badly. It's the only thing that she loses on. If you look at kind of like a characteristic by characteristic, now the media will throw at you like she's winning on foreign policy experience. Well, okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Right? I'm talking about, terrorism, keep us safe, smite the bad guys, that kind of thing. That's not foreign policy experience, that's something else, right? It doesn't take a lot of thought to realize she'd be a better statesperson, but that's not what people want when they're voting against terrorism. What they want is a person, that's got the biggest gun, the person that shows the least mercy, right? That's why he does well on that specific question, because he's seen as having no empathy whatsoever. And there is a streak. It's not just with, we can't just split people into authoritarians and non-authoritarians. The streak is within all of us that just wants to bomb the rest of the world into a crater. And that's what he can tap into, okay? But like I say, that's what she wanted to tap into, because she's a neocon. Which is not just a pejorative. It means somebody who believes in the ideas that were promulgated by these neoconservative philosophers like Leo Strauss and Michael Ignatieff. Whether you want to, on the right side of it or the left side of it. I call them neocons or liberal interventionists, the same damn thing, right? So again, I don't believe that either candidate got bumps from their respective conventions. I think that if you look at that a little more carefully, you'll see that it's not really there. Okay, what I believe is that Trump got a bump from the spate of terrorist attacks last month, and that it faded quickly. And in fact, that if you look, he got bumps in the Republican National Convention, the Republican primaries, all the way back to like this time last year. Whenever there was an attack, he got a bump. It's I'm not gonna do the regression, okay, but you know, I pointed this out once before. You know, if you want to do the math, go ahead. I can see it with my eyes, and that's where the correlation is. Okay, that's what takes his numbers up and down. Is when you see terrorist attacks. And that if you see this happen again, and you know that it will, if you see something get blown up and then you see Trump's numbers go up, they will fall back down again. And the longer that you go without an attack, the further they'll plateau. If we go between now and the election in November with no attacks, don't be surprised if Trump gets like 20%. Or at the very least, we'll be able to figure out what is the very rock bottom of right wing support in the United States, because there's no, I mean, like when you do line up Trump and Clinton in the minds of most people, unless, like I say, I'm an isolationist, right? I believe that America should withdraw from the world, that it should spend less money on outside its borders and more money fixing its crumbling infrastructure. And I think that it's at the point where it does have to make that choice, because maybe they didn't have to make that choice 20, 30 years ago, but they seem to have made the choice. They seem to have made the opposite choice, and now they do have to make the choice between one or the other, and they have to spend a lot of money. Okay, they should be looking at trillion-dollar infrastructure, right? They should cut the war budget in half and use that money to build things in the United States. This was one of the reasons I liked Sanders so much, because he was, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but he seemed to have that mindset, and that was so important at this point. And I do think that Trump is probably closer to that in mindset than Clinton. Clinton wants an empire. There's an article I read the other day about, or maybe it was today even, about how Clinton represents continuity, and therefore you should not be afraid, right? It's like Clinton is not a neocon because she represents continuity. It's like that again. It was the left wing Fox here. Continuity is neoconservatism. Obama is also a neocon, right? And look what she did when she was in the State Department, right? There were parts of it where it's like they just balls out, flat out, untruths, right? What was it? Hillary Clinton does not have the perspective that you have to contain China. Okay, well, why did she author the Asia pivot and push so hard for the TPP then? If she doesn't believe in a Chinese containment policy, then why did she spend 4 years containing China when she was the state? It's just that more than anything else. It's like it's one thing to look people in the eye and tell them lies when you know that they don't know any better. It's another thing to tell people that have an education, to look an educated person in the eye and lie to them in a way that they know that they can tear you down over, right? At that point, that's not. I mean, that demonstrates the foolishness of the person that's trying to be dishonest, right? The person that's stupid there is the person that's telling the lie. But yeah, so I was saying that like what when you put that down, and like I'm one of the few people that will see that upside to Trump, right? But what that also means is that I'm not in favor of cratering the planet, right? I don't believe in escalating and responding through escalated. I don't think that's the solution, right? And I'm in good company. Everybody who's ever read a book on the topic, right? Well, people that have ever read a book at all realize that that's not the right approach. Unfortunately, this is an election in the United States, right? So I mean, I'm not likely to be swayed by that. But I mean, I am the rare person that you'll meet that actually would prefer isolationism to empire. So I see that upside there. Okay, most people will see they won't agree. They'll prefer empire if they prefer anything at all, or if they care at all. And for them, they're going to look at the two candidates and they're going to see no reason at all whatsoever to vote for Trump except that. And if you take that away, there's no argument, right? It's like putting a plate of food down in front of you and then putting a plate of garbage down in front of you. In fact, let's be more precise, okay? First, you put down a plate of overly processed junk food that you would never eat, right? And you look at it and you say, that's barely edible. I cannot see myself consuming that. And then they put down another plate and it's just steaming dog shit. And then all of a sudden you see, okay, well, at least the first place is edible, right? And that's what most people, if you take away the vengeance card, that's what most people are going to see there, right? So I mean, it's the only chance he has is to remove everything except terrorism. And he's out there talking about the economy because the people that are advising him seem to want him to lose, right? But any bump that you see like that is going to fade. If we have no terrorist activity at all between now and then, if we see a little bit, then it might. If you see a serious attack, then that's the only chance. But it has to be at the right spot because it's going to fade otherwise, right? In fact, I may even argue that if it's persistent, then it doesn't work for him because we become desensitized to it on a certain point, right? What he has to do is find a way to capitalize on. He has to stop people from thinking. He has to find a way to get people to make an irrational choice. And I mean, obviously, trying to sit him down, sir, your only chance to win the election is to convince people to make an irrational choice. That's not what he wants to hear, right? But that's the reality of it, right? And if that can happen, then that is the factor that will activate his voters. They don't have to be, again, in this binary of authoritarian and non-authoritarian. They just have to have enough of a streak in them that they can be made very angry by some kind of an event, right? So in the video, there's charts about terrorism in Iran and Russia, and it's demonstrating that people that are afraid of these things will vote for Trump in overwhelming numbers. Yeah. The thing is that that's what she wanted to run on. And you can see it. You can see it in her, her whole anti-Russia stance. When she gets the opportunity, she rails against North Korea. She rails against China. She rails against Cuba. And she was Secretary of State. That she thought she would own that issue. The polling suggests otherwise, right? And I've already stated this, but I'll say it again. Okay, there is only one scenario, and that's the literal truth here, in which Donald Trump wins this election. Okay? Any other scenario, and he loses. The one possible scenario in which he has a chance of winning is if a serious terrorist attack at exactly the right moment happens. Okay? And as I stated, it will not simply be these people that can be categorized, they can have this little, tag put on their shoulder that says you're an authoritarian. It will be anybody that has a latent tendency, however repressed. And what he'll be able to do is he'll be able to flip that off and get people to vote against their own thoughts in an expression of temporary insanity, mass insanity, brought on by the trauma of extreme rage. It's the only way this happens. But it's not guaranteed to happen either. For a counterexample, go back a few years to the election in Spain. So even if that does happen, there's no guarantee that we react that way. But it's the only way it does happen.